Fab. So thanks for joining. So the
Okay.
topic for today's community mindset call is all around the scales and why the scales lie and what we should actually be looking at instead. So I know this is a topic that we've talked about personally,
hmm
and I'm a big advocate of not just solely relying on the scales and actually looking at other measurements instead. So what I really want to focus on here is around if you've ever stood on the scales first thing in the morning and then felt like your whole day then is shifting,
Yeah.
you're not alone. Like that is something that we all feel. And as women, especially, there are lots of factors that impact our weight and therefore impact the scales. So I'm
Yeah.
just going to talk through a few things today around why that happens, a little bit of science, and then some reasons, ways we can track things differently.
Okay.
So, firstly, we're just going to talk about why the scales lie. That's the first one. So, firstly, we will fluctuate every single day because of a number of reasons. And these are just, I've picked six here. First one, all around stress and our cortisol levels. So, if we are feeling stressed and our cortisol is higher, our body goes into a fight scenario, and therefore we will hold on to water in order to protect our bodies because our bodies are trying to fight that stress, and therefore we get that water retention. Water retention has a weight associated with it, and therefore the scales can go up because of that.
Okay.
If we have poor sleep, that causes our hormones to shift. Again, can impact our weight because of that level of cortisol leading to water retention. The other thing as well is how much salt we've taken in. So if you've had quite a high salt day, again, leads to more water retention, impacts the scales. Especially with women, our menstrual cycle can cause us to fluctuate by 1 to 3 kilos, depending on what point in the cycle we are. So if you weigh yourself on one day at one point in your cycle, you go fast forward a week, you could be up to 3 kilos difference. Absolutely nothing to do with your actual body fat, just the
Mhm.
way our body is holding on to and what our hormones do to those levels. Also, interestingly, strength training can cause us to feel slightly more inflamed because we are sending proteins and glycogen to our muscles. That has a weight associated with it, and as we know, muscle weighs more than fat, so the strength training can cause those muscles to feel more inflamed and therefore impact the scales. And then finally, travel. So I traveled last weekend and I definitely felt gross after being on a flight because I hadn't drunk enough water. I felt so dehydrated from being on the plane just from the like circulated air. Again, that can then impact our digestion and our hydration levels, which will then influence those fluctuations. So the point of this really is to say that you're not gaining weight overnight. It's not fat that's being stored. It is just our bodies holding on to water, which causes inflammation and those glycogen storages.
Yeah.
Then, just to say, the next point is that when we're thinking about the scales are really measuring us and us standing on them, which is essentially just gravity working. It's not actually measuring our progress. Hi, Anna. So also the scales cannot differ, well, depending on how good your bathroom scales are, but standard bathroom scales cannot determine the difference between fat, muscle, and water. And therefore, if we cannot clearly distinguish between those 3 points in a number, we cannot really reflect from a number on the scales what our body composition is like. So as our bodies change, the scale number is not reflective of that body composition. And also importantly, it doesn't measure our energy, our confidence, our strength, or our consistency. That is not a measurement that the standard bathroom scales can they're not sophisticated enough for that. And then also something to say, which I thought was important to highlight, is around a lag effect. So we can work today, we will not see the impact of that tomorrow. There is a lag in everything that we do, and our bodies work like a project in the office, or when you're building a house, you've got to build the foundations first and then the walls and then you put etc. So we need to put the input in and then the outcomes come later. So it's important to make sure that we continue to trust the process and that the process does take time. And we're also guilty of wanting things to happen instantly. But actually, everything we're doing now will show up at the end of March into April. And I wanted to just iterate that there is a lag with everything that we do. And it's important to remember that the progress is happening behind the scenes. When the scales don't move, that doesn't mean that there hasn't been progress.
Kerry, just a quick question, if that's
Yeah.
okay. What is like the average time until you should start seeing results? Because I feel like there's so much information out there, and there's always this rule like, oh, other people will see it in you first and all the other thing. But like, is there like a rule of thumb if you're consistent? Like, when should you be like, okay, it should start coming down?
Um, I don't think there is an
Okay.
actual like scientific, it will happen at this point. It is a little bit more variable than that. I believe within, I say 12 weeks,
Okay.
because I feel in that way, in that length of time, that's enough time for you to really have be consistent. I was reading the other day about habits, and apparently it takes 66 days to form a habit. So
Mm.
if you think you have to get past that point to actually then be consistently doing something, and if you're consistently going to the gym, eating healthy, then the results will follow. There is something to say that we don't see it in ourselves. People see it in us first. I do think there is a psychological factor there. But I would say at least 12 weeks.
Okay, cool. No, that's helpful. It's just like, I'm sure everyone says it, but I'm like, how the hell do you stay motivated when you're like doing all the good stuff? But then I suppose there's other things, isn't it? Like how your jeans fit or like how you feel in your clothes and like
Yeah,
all the other stuff that goes with it. So
yeah,
yeah. Okay, cool.
exactly.
Thanks, mate.
Which is part two of my of
Sorry.
my presentation, Anna.
Sorry, you
No, no,
can
you're
tell I'm
good.
an account manager. I'm like, right, question time. Sorry, sorry.
No, no, no. Fire the questions away. But yeah, that is the next. That is, if we go on to my next slide, what to track
Oh, I'm
instead.
so excited.
Spoiler alert. Measurements. So things that you can measure instead, and things that I do recommend and I tell you guys to look at is around actually getting the tape measure out and physically measuring your body. Hips, waist, thighs, and bust are really, really good ones. You could measure you could go around your arms, around your thighs, calves. You could literally break down every part of your body and measure and keep a track and do it consistently. I recommend doing it at the same time on a day each week. I personally do mine on a Tuesday morning. That's just a cycle I've gotten into and it works for me. I know I need an extra 15 minutes in the morning to do this. And also taking photos. When I first started on my journey, I was a bit like, oh, I don't know about this. And actually, I didn't notice the difference until I saw side by side photos. And I think it's such a good way of actually seeing, because, like we said, you don't see it in yourself when you're standing in the mirror until you can actually physically see the evidence. So I know it can be a bit daunting to take those photos to begin with, but they are such a good measurement. And by looking at these things individually, they actually reflect the fat loss and that composition that we were talking about. And when we have those daily fluctuations, we can see that more clearly in these measurements than in what the scales say. So if you do have a spike, you'll notice it in one of these measurements, and then you can really try and then pinpoint, oh, okay, that's why. And that I had a really heavy weekend. I traveled, I've been on holiday, those sorts of things. And you can be a bit more specific on what the actual reasons are. And these you can see the more incremental changes if you're measuring these things individually. And Tracy, you certainly noticed that
Yeah.
with the photos, didn't you?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I'll have to put them side by side though.
Yeah.
and the measurements, definitely that's really worked, and it's the best way. The scales don't do it for me. I just can't, because you just get on them and you think, really, I've done that all week and nothing's shown, or it'll go up a couple of kilos or whatever it is. So for me, I've just not bothered with the scales. I've done it all the pictures and the measurements. It's been the best thing to do.
Fab. That's good to know. And then the other thing then is everything else that is a non-scale victory. So things that we actually can't tangibly necessarily measure. But things like our focus, if we are feeling better in ourselves and we don't maybe get that afternoon slump, or you've got better focus in a meeting in the morning because you've had a really good breakfast, for example, our energy levels are up, so you're able to actually get up when the alarm goes off, or you might be getting up before the alarm because you've had a better night's sleep. Confidence, if your clothes are fitting better, that instantly makes us feel better in ourselves. And just confidence in showing up with other parts of our lives. So confidence at work, with our friends and our family. Just generally, if we're feeling better in ourselves, our confidence should improve. And then also, if we are eating well, working out, getting our movement and all those things in, we should in theory then sleep better because our energy is more stable and we feel tired in an evening and we're ready to go to bed rather than being on high alert. And then also just our mood. If our hormones are stable, our blood sugars are stable, the mood will be better. And if we have controlled the inflammation, we should feel less bloated as well. So all these other things that the scales cannot tell us. Then also around strength and performance. So if we're working out and we're consistent, the scales cannot show us, and we should be measuring how we're feeling in our workouts. Are we lifting better, heavier? Is our form better? Have we got more stamina? Are we able to walk further, take the extra flight of stairs instead of the lift? All those sorts of things we should also be measuring on top of the actual key scientific metrics. I also put on here just around like showing up for your friends and family. If we are, it's not all just about performance in terms of actual performance with like lifting, but actually just how we are performing in our lives day to day. If we are able to feel better in ourselves, we're more confident, we're likely to show up better for those people that are around us. And then finally, just around habit consistency, this is a real driver for a transformation. As I said, I think it takes 6 to 6 days to form a habit, but this is really for everything. Our eating, our steps, our workouts. We get in the cycle of doing this, it just becomes second nature for us, and it then impacts on our stress and everything else. So building these habits is a real key thing for us to also keep a track of, and it's important to reward ourselves on the good habits that we are embedding in our lives. And then final part of this is really just to say like how to trust the process. So we said, Anna, you were saying about how do you stay motivated if it's not necessarily, you're not seeing those results when we maybe want them to. Just a couple of things, like I know as part of my program, I have those weekly check-ins, and the reason for doing that is to have a look at the full picture. That we want the data there, but we also don't want the data to drive everything that we do. So the scales is one metric. That's why we have the measurements as well, the actual physical metrics, but also why I ask about sleep, nutrition. Have you met any goals? Because we want to think about this as a whole, not just the scales and the weight is one thing. It's about forming habits and building a lifestyle that factors in everything, factors in those habits, factors in the strength, our mood, etc. Because it's all well and good us hitting the gym every week and eating really healthily, but if it's not improving other parts of our lives, then we need to make sure that there's a connection between the two. Also, just to say around giving things a 2-week rule. So we shouldn't just change things based on having one bad week. 2 weeks ago, I was terrible. I didn't eat what I was meant to eat. I was way off track with my workouts, but I'm back on it again. And I'm now thinking about that as a 2 week period, not just a 1 week period. So I know my body now needs to adjust in that second week. And now going into this third week, I'm back in another 2 week window. So thinking about that as a rolling window, give yourself and give your body time to respond to a potential change. And if things aren't changing after that 2 weeks, that's when you can look to make some changes. But we need to be consistent for that time period before we then think something isn't working. And also just put there to be kind to yourself. We can be so hard on ourselves when something doesn't quite go to plan. We had 3 workouts planned and we only did 2. That's not a failure. Doing 2 is better than doing none. So we need to make sure that sometimes we do remind ourselves that we aren't robots. We have other things going on in our lives. So we do have to give ourselves that grace. And then final thing is just to say to celebrate the mini wins. As I said, them remembering showing up is part of the progress, and it's part of the process. You showed up. That's a win. You fueled your body right. That's a win. You lifted 1 set heavier. Win. We need to celebrate these things and remember that all those small wins make such a big win at the end. So just remember that to trust yourself and trust in momentum and trust the process, you will get to that win at the end. So just to recap, I'll just whiz back through. So part 1 was around why the scales lie. So to note that we do fluctuate daily for all of these reasons. And that's completely normal, especially in women. 2, that the scales are measuring gravity, not your progress. 3, that lag effect, inputs first, and then the outcomes will follow. What we're tracking instead, these measurements and the photos, those non-scale victories, our strength, and importantly, our performance as well, in and out of the gym. That's not necessarily just strength performance, and those habit consistencies, remembering they're the key driver for transformation. And then trusting the process, doing your check-ins, looking at the whole picture, not just on those numbers. The numbers are part of it, but not the full story. Give yourselves that 2-week rule, making sure that you have that time for your body to respond. And most importantly, celebrating those wins. So, do you guys have any questions or anything you want me to talk about in any more detail?
No, I think that's covered most of it for me, really, because that is a lot of your program, isn't it, that I'm doing with you. So, and you know what I'm like. I message you when I've got my jeans on that didn't fit and things. That's celebrating a little win. I think it's very important, really important to do that. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Nothing from my side. I just resonate like everything you were like saying. I was like, yeah, I do that. I do that. I just think we just give ourselves such a hard time. I do it particularly. Like I haven't done this today. It's like the other day, like and Tracy, I'm going for some surgery on Friday, so my back, I'm really limited what I can do at the minute. But like I couldn't do my workouts, which I know was the right thing to do. I had to listen to my body. So I did more walking with the dog and I did like 15,000 steps. And that is still a really big win. But in my head, like now I look back and I reflected, I'm like, no, that's still really good. That's above average. But on the day, I was like, yeah, but you haven't done the workout. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's just like, for me, it's like constantly reminding myself, like, okay, you're doing what you can, what's available to you. And like, that's still better than just like sitting on the sofa and like pushing it to the back of your head. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, 100% we can be so hard on ourselves.
I think particularly as females as well, like Chaz, I don't know if it's just my half, but like he is not like that at all. He's like, oh well, like another day, new day tomorrow. Whereas like we're just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been a bit distracted. I've been doing my wedding admin as I've been on this call, doing little stamps. But that's really helpful. Thank you, Kerry. I always like your presentations. They're to the point and they're very good. I like them.
Yeah.
That was useful. So I'm just going to stop sharing this now.
Also, Tracy, are you Zach's mum?
I am, yeah.
Yeah, I recognise the surname. Oh, I know Zach from Glastonbury. Like, so long ago. I
Oh,
saw the surname and I was like, it's got to be Zach's mum, but
yeah.
I wasn't 100% sure.
There's not many of
Oh,
us with that surname.
yeah. Nice to meet you.
You too, Anna. Oh, and you're getting married. That sounds exciting.
Yeah, it was 6 months yesterday. So,
Oh,
yeah, it's coming around very quick now.
it
So,
will do.
yeah,
Yeah.
so my goal is just to feel good in my wedding dress. Like, it fits, but I know I can feel better in it. So
I
that's
know what you
my
mean.
main
Yeah.
goal. So,
Yeah. I'm sure it will.
fingers
Yeah.
crossed. We've got the lovely Kerry sorting us out, so I'm sure we'll be just fine.
Exactly. Definitely.
Amazing. Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kerry.
Thanks, guys. Enjoy your evening. I'll speak to you soon.
See
Okay.
you
Bye.
later.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.